Professor, hold on just one moment. I've got my connection back to CNN's Anderson Cooper. Anderson, what's the water and food situation there?
It is very bad. I mean, there basically, as far as we know, is no potable water. There's no electricity for pumps, and there's a lot of the people have been evacuated. We found a couple of people just kind of stumbling around and just kind of looking for something. They don't have electricity. They can't cook up their food. It's rotting. Some people have been encouraged to try to barbecue whatever food they have in their refrigerator, but you know, there's no ice. It is really miserable for people here right now. We've seen a bunch of people lined up for some ice just to get a cool drink.
Anderson, barbecue how? Rub two sticks together?
I'm sorry?
How do you barbecue? How do you tell the people to barbecue food? They have no electricity, they have no water, they have no home to go to. Barbecue how? What do they mean?
Well, I mean, you know, that's the thing. All you can do is build a fire and try to cook up what you have. I mean, it's a survival technique, you know. I mean, it's really gotten down to that, and it's hard to sort of, you know, we're all comfortable in our regular lives, and it's hard to imagine how quickly you can be just taken out of your life, living your normal life, and you know, being brought into survival conditions, and that's what people are in right now, Nancy. You know, darkness has fallen. People got nowhere to go. It is really, it's miserable, and it's just going to get worse. There's no end in sight, really, for these people.
It's hard to explain to people who didn't live through Hurricane Katrina how difficult it was. Truthfully, I'm not even going to try to. This story is not about Hurricane Katrina. It's about what I saw in the aftermath. Now, there are some simple facts that you need to know. In January 2006, the city was still empty. Very few people had moved back here. A second fact that you need to know is there was absolutely no public utilities active. And yeah, they had some power in the French quarters in the CBD, but for us in the neighborhoods, there was absolutely no streetlights. So when night fell, you were either downtown in the quarters or you were inside. And to define what I mean by inside, I mean a small FEMA trailer. And yeah, the same FEMA trailers that we all learned were toxic. Remember, formaldehyde poisoning, causing cancer and other health problems? That was home. My wife and I were living in one of these death traps in my neighborhood of Lakeview, not too far from City Park. For those of you who don't know, City Park is at the heart of the city of New Orleans, hence the name City Park. She and I had just had the most terrible argument. I don't know if it was the stress of being in such small quarters or PTSD from living through such traumatic events, but we had a knockdown, drag-out argument. The kind of fight that it's best to walk away from. And as it was nothing outside but darkness, I, being the man, was the one who had to walk away. So I stormed outside, hopped in my truck, and pulled off. As I was driving away, the exchange of words just replayed back in my head like an old broken record. My wife Karen's words stung and hurt. I'm pretty sure mine did too. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been so zoned out and angry that nothing, absolutely nothing exists outside this mental bubble and haze? All your senses are shut off and you're completely inside your own head? Well, that's exactly where I was that night. I didn't even realize that the gas light on my truck was on until the damn thing stopped. So now, I'm stranded on the side of the road, and there are very few gas stations around. And none of them, absolutely none, were anywhere near me. So I started walking, headed back home. And honestly, man, I can't tell you how long it took me to get to the area of City Park. But as I was walking down the side of the road, I do remember the moon being bright. Bright enough that I felt comfortable in a situation that otherwise I shouldn't have been comfortable in. And with everything going on in the city, I shouldn't have been my ass out there at all. As I walked, I felt this breeze blowing against my face. It was cold and strong. So cold that it forced me to pull my black hoodie over my head. And that's when I got my first whiff of this smell. Rotten meat, wet dog, blood. Definitely blood. And it was strong. Strong enough to stop me in my tracks. Now, nothing in that park should have smelled like that. And as I stood there on the side of the road, I noticed something moving ahead of me. This thing was no more than 50 yards away from me, and it walked out onto the roadway from a row of trees. And what I saw, I still don't believe to this day. I could see this dog-like head, wide shoulders, and whatever this thing was, its body tapered down to its waist. It was hunched over at first. Then, as its feet hit the concrete, it stood straight up. This thing was 6 to 7 feet tall. Man, I stood there in absolute disbelief. And what it did next was confusing. It kind of skipped forward, then leaped onto the neutral ground. After that, it took one more leap, and it was off the neutral ground and crossing into the park. Now you have to understand, the minimum distance from one side of a neutral ground to the other in New Orleans is about 40 to 50 feet. And this thing jumped it with no problem. And I heard about the Rougarou from my family, mostly Cajun and coon asses. But it being here in the heart of a city, man, this had me shook up. So I quickly turned and started walking back to my truck. In my mind, I'm hoping and praying that this creature was alone. I had been walking about another 10 minutes, and I saw a National Guard truck heading down the road. I stood there in the middle of the roadway, arms straight up in the air, waving, trying to flag them down. But these bastards just drove straight past me. And I know they saw me. They had to. That walk home was the scariest thing I had ever experienced in my life. Just the thought of something like that being out there completely messed my head up. When I got back to the trailer, I was so shook up, my old lady just asked me what happened. And as I started to tell her what I saw, she didn't seem surprised at all. And she believed me 100%. From that day forward, whenever I left out of the house, I was on guard. The Rougarou out in the swamps, man, I could see something like that happening. But here in the city of New Orleans, to this day, that still blows my mind.